A distress call from a flight leader to the control tower. Tower, we have a problem. Something isn't right here. We can't control the aircraft's movement at all, and something is pulling us. Our position is unknown. That was the last message the American control tower ever received from the leader of Flight 19 on December 5th, 1945. And after that, the line went dead. Flight 19 was a group of 5 military aircraft that vanished without a trace during a routine training mission over a stretch of ocean that would later become known as the Bermuda Triangle. But the story doesn't end there. When the U.S. Navy sent rescue planes to search for the missing aircraft, something even stranger happened. One of the rescue planes itself exploded in midair and disappeared too. Welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to try to answer a question that has puzzled millions of people for decades. Why do things vanish in the Bermuda Triangle? And this time, we're going on a longer journey than usual, spanning more than 150 years of eerie stories, starting with sailing ships that disappeared in the 19th century, all the way to the most recent scientific explanations that have tried to crack this mystery. And before we start, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so our videos reach you as soon as they drop. The Bermuda Triangle is a vast stretch of the Atlantic Ocean that lies roughly between the islands of Bermuda, the U.S. state of Florida, and the city of San Juan in Puerto Rico. Because the area is marked out by 3 points, it earned the name Triangle, and since one of those points is Bermuda itself, the common name became the Bermuda Triangle. The region covers around 1,125,000 square kilometers, and some estimates push that figure up to roughly 1.5 million square miles. That's an enormous area, larger than entire countries. So how did this ordinary stretch of ocean turn into one of the most notorious, mysterious places on Earth? The story didn't begin in the 20th century, as many people assume. Its roots go back much further than that. Before the name Bermuda Triangle even existed, there were already eerie stories being told about this part of the ocean. According to some accounts, a British Navy training ship vanished in 1880, shortly after sailing from Bermuda, taking its entire crew with it without a single trace ever being found. Just a year later, one of the strangest stories ever linked to the region emerged, the tale of the Ellen Austin. In 1881, the Ellen Austin was sailing from Liverpool toward New York when it came across another vessel that appeared to be completely abandoned, with no crew and no sign of what had happened aboard it. The captain of the Ellen Austin decided to salvage the derelict ship and its cargo, sending a small group of his own men aboard to sail it back with him. During the night, a storm separated the two vessels. By morning, when contact was re-established, the captain found that the ship he'd sent his men to was abandoned once again, with no trace of those men anywhere. It's a genuinely chilling story, and it has been retold in dozens of books and articles for a century and a half. But when later researchers went back through official British shipping records, they found that a vessel called the Meta had been built in 1854 and later renamed Ellen Austin. Yet there are no official casualty lists tied to this incident and no newspaper coverage from that period confirming the dramatic details the story later picked up. In other words, the underlying incident may have happened in some form, but the chilling details added to it over the decades are what turned it into legend. Interestingly, the name Bermuda Triangle itself wasn't around for all those decades in which the incident supposedly took place. The term didn't exist until 1964, when American writer Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine that gathered a number of mysterious disappearances together and, for the first time, called the region the Bermuda Triangle. Gaddis wrote that the triangle was a reminder that despite all our progress in fast aircraft, flight recorders, and radar tracking, the world is still vast enough for men, machines, and ships to vanish without leaving a trace. From that moment on, this wasn't just a scattering of unrelated incidents anymore. It had a name and an entire identity, a cursed zone, as some newspapers later called it. Writers began racing to collect every mysterious maritime or aviation incident that had ever happened anywhere near this triangle and link them all together, even when decades separated one incident from another. One of the most famous stories connected to the area is that of the American ship USS Cyclops. In March 1918, the ship, a Navy coal carrier, set sail from Barbados bound for the port of Baltimore, carrying around 309 passengers and crew, along with a massive cargo of roughly 10,800 tons of manganese ore. It was expected to arrive within a matter of days, but it never did. Everyone waited for it to arrive, but the ship vanished completely. Stranger still, it never sent out a distress call, and it never responded to any later attempt at contact. No message, no warning, not even a clear trace of its fate. More than a century has passed, and the fate of the ship and its crew remains a complete mystery to this day, with no wreckage ever recovered. The American president at the time reportedly said that only God and the ocean knew where the ship had gone. And from there, the stories kept piling up. Ships vanishing, planes vanishing, and sometimes submarines too. Newspapers and magazines began covering these incidents in a way that made the Bermuda Triangle sound like a place fundamentally different from anywhere else on Earth. Over time, certain newspapers, magazines, and writers began collecting these incidents and stringing them together. The magazine, Fate, was one of the most prominent outlets covering strange phenomena of this kind. Then came the writer Richard Weiner, who published a book titled The Devil's Triangle. After him came Vincent Gaddis with his famous article, and then Charles Berlitz, who also published books on Bermuda that went on to sell enormous numbers of copies worldwide. This is where the legend really took on a life of its own. It was no longer just mysterious maritime and aviation incidents. Some people started talking about supernatural forces. Theories emerged claiming that the lost city of Atlantis lay beneath Bermuda and that its mysterious energy was what caused ships to vanish. Others said the place was tied to demonic forces, and some newspapers even gave the region nicknames like the Lost Land and the Cursed Zone. Then an even stranger explanation appeared: aliens. According to this theory, extraterrestrial beings were abducting the ships, planes, and people who ventured too close to the area. Another theory claimed that ships and aircraft were falling into a time hole that transported them to another era or even to an entirely parallel dimension. Some went even further, talking about giant sea monsters like the Kraken or mythical sirens luring sailors to their doom. None of these explanations, however, is backed by any reliable scientific evidence. There is no scientific proof of any supernatural force in Bermuda, and no evidence that the region is a time portal or a hub for alien abductions. So, if none of these explanations hold up, what's actually happening in the Bermuda Triangle? As the legend spread, researchers began studying the incidents linked to the region in search of natural explanations. One theory that gained attention involves gases found on the ocean floor, most notably methane hydrates. Methane hydrate is an ice-like substance that contains methane gas trapped within its structure. Under certain conditions, these hydrates can break down and release large amounts of methane gas. This phenomenon caught researchers' interest because a massive release of gas from the seabed could create pockets of bubbles in the surrounding water. And that raises a real problem. If a large volume of gas mixes into the water, the density of the water in that area can drop sharply. That, in turn, could reduce the water's ability to keep a ship afloat, potentially causing it to lose buoyancy and sink extremely quickly. So quickly that the crew might not even have time to send out a distress call. But is this really the secret behind Bermuda? It's not quite that simple. Methane hydrates exist in many places around the world. They're not unique to the Bermuda Triangle, and scientists have never proven that they're actually responsible for the disappearances of the famous ships in the region. There's a far more down-to-earth explanation: the weather. The Bermuda Triangle sits right in the middle of what's known as Hurricane Alley, an area known for frequent tropical storms and destructive hurricanes throughout the year. Storms out on the open ocean can turn into a serious threat to both ships and aircraft. Massive waves, powerful winds, rapidly shifting weather conditions, and poor visibility. There's also another major factor running straight through the region: the Gulf Stream, a powerful, fast-moving ocean current that behaves almost like a river running inside the ocean itself. This current is capable of scattering the wreckage of a ship or plane very quickly after an incident, making it extremely difficult, sometimes nearly impossible, to ever find any trace of it afterward. The area is also known for what are called rogue waves, sudden, massive waves that can reach tens of meters in height and are powerful enough to swallow even large ships within seconds, leaving no time to send out any kind of distress signal. There's also talk of magnetic anomalies and possible navigational equipment malfunctions specific to this region. But even this doesn't require any supernatural explanation, because navigational errors, equipment failure, and severe weather conditions are, on their own, more than capable of causing real disasters. Since we opened this episode with the story of Flight 19, let's return to it in more detail. Flight 19 was a routine training mission involving 5 Avenger torpedo bombers belonging to the U.S. Navy, which had taken off from a base in Florida. The group was led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced pilot. But later investigations revealed that Taylor mistakenly reported his position during the flight, believing he was flying over the Florida Keys when he was actually over the Bahamas, a considerable distance from where he thought he was. Because of this navigational error, he began leading the group in the wrong direction while searching for land, as fuel steadily ran out and the weather worsened with nightfall. Eventually, contact was lost with all 5 aircraft, and none of them has ever been found to this day. As for the rescue plane that exploded during the search, it was a Martin Mariner, a type of aircraft known for recurring technical issues involving fuel vapor leaking inside the cabin, which made it prone to exploding from even the smallest spark, a clear technical explanation with nothing mysterious about it whatsoever. In other words, a simple navigational mistake, a fuel shortage, bad weather, and a well-documented mechanical flaw in a specific aircraft model. That's the whole story. The legend didn't stop in the 1940s either. More recent incidents have also been attributed to the region. In 1963, a vessel known as the Scarlet Cruise disappeared in the Caribbean Sea, close to the Bermuda Triangle. The story was circulated as yet another unexplainable mystery. But later investigations found that severe weather conditions that day, combined with engine problems aboard the ship, were the real cause of the disaster, not any supernatural force. This pattern keeps repeating: a real incident, a clear technical or weather-related explanation, but the version of events that reaches the public is often something else entirely and far more dramatic. Now we reach the most intriguing part of the story. American researcher Lawrence David Couchet, author of the book The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, went back and reviewed the stories and incidents that had been used to build up the legend, and he found something very important. Many of the stories weren't actually told the way the books and magazines claimed. Some incidents had been exaggerated, some details had been altered, and sometimes incidents were linked to the Bermuda Triangle even though they'd actually happened somewhere else entirely. Take the story of sailor Donald Crowhurst, for example. He disappeared while competing in a solo sailing race, and it was later determined that he had taken his own life. Yet some retellings linked his story to the Bermuda Triangle, even though the evidence shows he was nowhere near the region and the race itself never passed through it. In another case, a ship's disappearance was attributed to the Bermuda Triangle, even though the ship had actually vanished in the Pacific Ocean, an entirely different ocean altogether.
Even the story of the Ellen Austen that we opened with earlier, Cush himself noted that he could find no newspaper coverage of it from the time it supposedly happened, in 1880 or 1881. Instead, he traced its earliest written appearance to a book published more than 60 years after the incident's claimed date. And that's where the real picture starts to come into focus. One of the things that helped the legend spread the most was the way certain incidents were described as happening under perfectly calm conditions. Calm seas, no storms, no waves. And then, suddenly, the ship vanishes. But when researchers went back to weather records and Coast Guard logs, they found that some of these incidents actually took place under extremely severe weather conditions. The reality, in other words, was quite different from the story that reached the public.
Among the stories that got wildly exaggerated is the tale of a ship known as the SS Valley Fog. Rumors spread claiming the ship vanished and then reappeared, with everyone aboard gone, except the captain, who was found sitting dead in his cabin, a still warm cup of coffee sitting on the table in front of him. It sounds like something straight out of a horror film. But when you actually look at the details, a very different picture emerges. Maritime authorities denied the popular version of the story, and photographs of the wreckage and the recovery of bodies later surfaced. Documented accounts point to an explosion linked to the ship's fuel tank as the real cause. In other words, the horrifying tale that spread through books was never what actually happened in reality. And here's the surprising part. The U.S. Coast Guard and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, have both stated that incidents occurring in the Bermuda Triangle aren't necessarily any more frequent than incidents occurring in other major maritime regions. One researcher told a British newspaper that the proportion of ships and planes disappearing in the Bermuda Triangle is roughly in line with any other large maritime region in the world, once you look at it as a percentage of total traffic through the area. In other words, there may not actually be any unusual disappearance rate at all, contrary to what most people imagine. Ships and planes cross the region constantly, and the vast majority reach their destination just fine. In fact, the area has become one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world today. But whenever a mysterious incident does occur, the media latches onto it. Then come the books, then the films, then the legends. And every time the story gets retold, new details get added to it. That's how an ordinary incident or a maritime disaster gradually turns into a supernatural mystery.
Interestingly, there's another region in the world associated with mysterious disappearances that never achieved quite the same fame. It's known as the Devil's Sea, near Japan. It's surrounded by stories of ships and planes vanishing, along with genuinely difficult natural and weather conditions. One widely circulated story involves an American aircraft that disappeared en route to Tokyo, even though flying conditions had seemed fine at the time. There are also accounts of ships suffering fires or mysterious accidents in the area. In one story, Japanese authorities sent a ship to search the region and it never returned either. But once again, the existence of strange incidents doesn't necessarily mean there's some supernatural force at work. Oceans are simply vast, weather can change rapidly, and finding the wreckage of a ship or plane at the bottom of the sea is never an easy task.
So, what's the real truth behind the Bermuda Triangle? The answer is probably far simpler than we'd expect. The Bermuda Triangle is not a gateway to another world. There is no reliable scientific evidence of aliens, supernatural forces, a demonic throne, or a time warp anywhere in the region. It's simply a vast stretch of ocean that huge numbers of ships and planes have been crossing for centuries. And yes, incidents do happen there, but maritime and aviation incidents happen everywhere in the world. The reason Bermuda seems different is that a collection of mysterious incidents, some real, some exaggerated, and some entirely fabricated, were gathered together after the name first appeared in the 1960s. From there, books, magazines, and films kept linking them together and adding more and more dramatic details over the course of more than 60 years. Let's go back now to the story we opened with. Flight 19. 5 military aircraft that vanished during a training mission in 1945. Then one of the rescue planes exploded. Was that caused by some mysterious force? Not necessarily. The Martin Mariner rescue aircraft had well-known problems tied to their fuel tanks, and there are plausible natural explanations for what happened. As for the disappearance of the Flight 19 aircraft themselves, it's tied to factors like the navigational error made by the group's leader, dwindling fuel, worsening weather as night fell, and other entirely realistic possibilities. Over the years, the incident turned into one of the most famous Bermuda Triangle stories of all, and that's how the legend grew far bigger than the incident itself. If you look at the Bermuda Triangle on a map, you won't find anything supernatural there. No secret gateway, no alien city, no time vortex, and no place where things simply vanish the moment they cross its boundary. It's just a piece of the ocean, a region with difficult, unpredictable weather because of its position within Hurricane Alley, where accidents happen just like they do in any other maritime region, and where finding wreckage is genuinely hard because of the sheer force of the Gulf Stream. The difference is that every mysterious incident there has become perfect material for books, articles, and films ever since the 1960s, because the simple truth just doesn't sell the way a legend does. For example, you probably clicked on this video because of an eye-catching thumbnail. Of course you did, and that's exactly where the power of media lies. The more mysterious a story sounds, the more curiosity it sparks. And the more curiosity it sparks, the more views and book sales follow. That's probably why the Bermuda Triangle remains one of the clearest examples of how media can take a handful of real incidents, along with a few fabricated ones, and turn them into a global legend that has lasted for well over a century and a half. In the end, the Bermuda Triangle is just an ordinary stretch of ocean combined with some rough weather, a powerful ocean current, a handful of human errors, and a whole lot of stories that were exaggerated or invented outright over the years. So there's our answer to the question we started with. Why do things vanish in the Bermuda Triangle? Simply put, ships and planes can run into trouble anywhere in the world, but in Bermuda, those incidents got something extra. A legend. As always, if there's a question on your mind that you can't stop thinking about, drop it in the comments below. It might just become the topic of our next episode. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and share it. And if this is your first time watching, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so our videos reach you the moment they're out. See you in the next episode.